Hey, everybody. Welcome to Odd and Untold, the podcast where we talk about all things strange and spooky. And this week, we're returning to Pennsylvania for some Bigfoot sightings, northeastern Pennsylvania specifically. I've chosen this as I choose a lot of my episodes, mainly because it affects me. I'm going to be spending a lot of time in Pennsylvania this summer, which is great. And thought I wanted to do just some Pennsylvania episodes so this week and next week will be kind of focused on Pennsylvania. And the main reason for that, just to get into a little bit of the backstory, we are switching up our summer vacations a bit, and we will not be going to Bantam Lake this year, just for a variety of reasons, which I'm not really going to get into. But there are a number of reasons why we just decided Bantam Lake is not really working for the family anymore. So this past weekend, my son started going on Airbnb and found some cool places for us to go as a family. Still get a lot of the things that we enjoy about camping, like swimming in the lake and boating and fishing and a campfire at night. So we found a place out in the Poconos of Pennsylvania. And, you know, me being who I am, I have to search the local news and reports for all sorts of sightings. And so for this one, I'm going to look at some Bigfoot sightings in and around the area that we're going to. There's not a lot in these counties. We're going to be talking about Columbia, Wayne, and Monroe counties tonight. So 3 counties, and there's 5 reports between those 3 counties. So not a lot of reports, but still stuff to talk about. And I may at some point look into UFO sightings up there or ghost stories. But next week, we'll talk a little bit more about the ghost stories and why we're talking about Columbia County. And maybe I'll talk about that a little more later in the episode. But just wanted to talk about some Pennsylvania Bigfoot sightings. I love Bigfoot. You guys seem to love Bigfoot. So let us get into some Bigfoot sightings from northeastern Pennsylvania. All right, so this first story is from Monroe County, and it is the only sighting I could find in the BFRO database for this county. So I'm going to talk about it. It's a road crossing, so very cool. So this one is from sometime in September 1978, 79. Fall. Woman remembers witnessing a tall, hairy figure in the Pocono Mountains. So this was nearest town is Mount Pocono. Nearest road, she doesn't remember. I mean, this is going back 45 years or so. So she writes, "It was late at night. We had a St. Bernard that loved to take long drives. We decided to take a drive in the Pocono Mountains of Pennsylvania. We would take familiar roads, then usually find a woodsy road to cut off on. That night, I believe we were in the Bushkill Falls area, which should be in Monroe County. We were on a narrow 2-lane road in a heavily wooded area. We approached an intersection with no stop signs. We actually stopped to look at a map. All of a sudden, a very tall figure crossed right in front of our car. We were shocked. It must have been at least 7 feet tall or more. Long arms, hairy body, ape-like appearance, very slender. It walked completely upright and just crossed over to the other side of the road. There was another car that approached this small intersection. That car also saw it because he stopped the car. Remember, this was a back road with no stop sign. Shortly after we had seen this creature, there was an article in the local newspaper about sightings in the state of Pennsylvania. I cut out the article and saved it, placing it in a book for safekeeping. After a while, we moved and the book with the article disappeared. I tried to contact the Morning Call, but you had to check out their archives to get any information. Also noticed, nothing I heard about. Other witnesses, another car at the intersection saw the same thing. We did not stop to talk about it. Other stories, only what the newspaper printed in the article that there were other sightings in the surrounding area. Time and conditions, late at night, it would have been around 11 to midnight. Heavily wooded environment." So let me talk about the follow-up investigation, and then I will give my thoughts on this one, because I do have a few. Follow-up investigation report by BFRO investigator Paul Conroy. And he says, "I interviewed this witness for approximately 30 minutes, and she was able to elaborate with the following details. The couple was stopped at a 4-way intersection and were reviewing a map when oncoming headlights caused them to look upwards when they saw the creature pass in front of the car. It was within arm's length of the front bumper. The face was described as somewhere between ape and human. The hair appeared to be reddish-brown. The height estimate was determined by comparing the animal to the vehicles. As the witnesses considered approaching the car that had stopped directly across from them, the car abruptly took off at a high rate of speed, indicating that the occupants had also witnessed the creature. This is a rural area with significant stretches of state game land. Considering the sighting took place over 30 years ago, it is safe to say that it was even more desolate with much less development. It has a strong game population. It is feasible that the area has the size and food source to support Sasquatch activity. We will update this report if we were able to locate the old newspaper article she is referring to. And that is not included here, so I'm guessing they couldn't find the article. So to give my thoughts on this, I mean, immediately this report sounded very similar to Brian Gosselin's report. I interviewed Brian a few weeks ago. He is the retired police officer who infamously ran into Bigfoot up on a Bear Road up in Whitehall, New York, back in 1976. But his description of the creature that he saw and this description here are almost identical. So a little over 7 feet tall, reddish brown hair, and slender on the skinny side. Brian said this, the thing he saw looked like it had missed a few meals. So not the bulky Pacific Northwest Bigfoot that we all sort of think about, but something a little bit more slender. And my buddy Scott Perry, who's been on the show many times, we've discussed this as well when talking about different types of Bigfoot, that here in the Northeast, they do seem to be less bulky than in the Pacific Northwest. They still seem to be pretty tall, but they seem to, again, not every report, but a lot of the reports tend to describe them as a little bit more slender, having missed a meal, a little, still tall, but not bulky like Patty, the Patterson-Gimlin film subject. And then down south, they seem to be a little bit shorter. They're more in like the, 6 to 7 foot range, but closer to 6 inches, 6.5 feet, slightly taller than a tall human being. Whereas in the Pacific Northwest and here in the Northeast, they're usually 7 foot is on the shorter side. They're usually 7, 8 feet tall, but slender. So I thought that was really interesting. Again, the reddish brown hair, we hear a lot of that here in the Northeast. And I do think it's interesting that another car stopped. There's no stop sign. It's an intersection. So probably a good idea to kind of slow down and make sure no one's coming. I mean, it was late at night. This is in the late 70s. Probably not a lot of traffic on this road. It's a back road, still a back road. So probably still not a ton of traffic, especially nearing midnight. So interesting that this other person sort of stopped and possibly, if not probably, saw the creature as well. I have to look and see if I can find this article. If I can, I will insert it here, but I'm guessing I'm not going to be able to find it. If the BFRO couldn't track it down, I am doubting I could. So really interesting. Again, the face, she saw the face somewhere between an ape and a human. So, make of that what you will. This, and again, there's lots of talk of bears in the Bigfoot world and debunking these things as bears. This is one of those reports. Like I said, it's either A or B. This is either somebody hoaxing and lying, or they actually saw something they can't explain. It was a Bigfoot. Bears do not walk on 2 legs. They are not typically skinny like that. She saw the face. A bear's not going to walk across the road on 2 legs. Again, they'll take a step or two and then back down to all 4s. But it seems like she got a good look at this creature. Someone else saw this creature and then tore off. And again, that doesn't mean that they saw it. I mean, the BFRO investigator sort of makes that assumption. I don't. This could have been someone who's just driving really fast. Maybe they saw nothing. They could have been talking to someone else in the car. They could have been distracted. Who knows? Just because they tore off really fast doesn't mean they were scared, doesn't mean they saw anything. But a 7 foot tall bipedal ape walking across the road, I think someone would have seen it if they were parked at the light. I mean, you're at the light, there's headlights coming at you, you're kind of waiting for them to go, you're going to go. If this animal runs across in front of you, you're going to see it. So this one, again, I like this story. Road crossing, Scott and I have discussed this many times on the show. Why do they happen? Why do these creatures see headlights coming and then walk across the road in front of them, when if they waited a couple of seconds, they could cross freely and never be seen? Why does it happen? I don't know. These are supposed to be intelligent primates close to humans. They're not deer. They're not rabbits. They're not skunks. These lesser intelligent animals that just kind of run out. Doesn't make sense. What would be chasing a Bigfoot that would make it so scared that it would take its life in its hands by running out in front of a car or risk discovery? I'm not sure. Weird story, but again, it's either A or B. Either this person is lying or they saw something that we can't explain. There's no way this was a bear. So let us move on to the next story. All right, so our second story comes to us from Wayne County, which is just north of Monroe County and very close to where we're going to be staying this summer in northeastern Pennsylvania in the Poconos. And again, I had to branch out to surrounding counties to find Bigfoot reports because Monroe just had the one and Wayne has two. So we will go through these and then we will get on to Columbia County. So for this sighting, this happened back in 2014 in the winter, January 19th, it looks like. Possible nighttime road crossing near Bethany. So we have another road crossing here. Nearest town is Bethany, nearest road 5 miles south of Route 670 and Route 247. And they write, on Sunday night, January 19th, 2014, last night, approximately 9 p.m., so it looks like this is like the next day, I was returning home from the Schoolhouse restaurant on Route 670 north of Dyebury, Pennsylvania, or Dibbury, I don't know. Rebecca will correct me. I'm sure I'm pronouncing this wrong. I was heading south, coming down a hill, and an oncoming car had his high beams on. I glanced away from the beams, and when I looked back at the road, I was coming to the bottom of a dip in the road. And as I looked back at the road, I saw two very large legs with extremely large feet attached. I saw 3 strides, and it was across the road, and the 4th step it took up a 7-foot bank. The fur appeared to be long and very dark, almost black, with a bit of a sheen to it. The fur appeared to go all the way to the ground around the feet. Because I was approaching the bottom of the dip, my headlights were only catching the very bottom of where the road came back up, and he was at the very top of my headlight beams. I backed up and pulled out a light, looked for tracks through my car window, and even though I am an experienced hunter and tracker, I felt goosebumps, and the hair on the back of my neck was standing up, and I left after I locked the doors. I've seen many bears, 3 mountain lions, a fisher, and many other wild animals in many areas. This was not a 4-legged creature. Also noticed, nothing, other witnesses, no. Other stories, there are many reported sightings in PA, one including a photograph in Cherry Ridge, Pennsylvania, which is less than 10 miles from this sighting. I will see if I can pull up that photo and throw it in here, but if not, he mentions it regardless. Timing conditions, 9 p.m. Environment, thick woods with snow on the road with bare spots from the tire tracks. So a follow-up investigation report by BFRO investigator Istvan Ujvari. I hope I'm pronouncing that correct. As described by the witness, he saw a set of very large legs and feet move rapidly across the road in front of him from left to right. Route 670 is a rural 2-lane road, 1 lane in each direction. The creature covered the distance from the left side shoulder to the right side shoulder of the road in 3 steps. Its 4th step was over the guardrail on the right shoulder. The witness described this last step over the guardrail as so seemingly effortless that, quote, it was like you or I stepping over a case of beer, end quote. Thoughts on this one? Another road crossing. Again, the same questions come up. Why do these creatures do this? There's high beams, there's lights, there's engine sounds. Why do these things run across the road? But this guy sees 2 very large legs with large feet. It took 3 strides to cross a 2-lane highway and took a 4th step up a 7-foot bank. And he's seeing this creature take long strides, again, long legs, not short little stubby legs. I've posted this picture of the bear standing up many times, and the back legs that it is standing on, when they stand up, those legs are stubbly. You know, they're short. And again, a bear in the wild is going to take a step or 2 before falling back down onto all 4s. The standing up is usually to reach something, or it's an intimidation tactic. They don't move around bipedally. They stand up to, like I said, reach something, or they're trying to look bigger. They stand up and it's an intimidation thing. Stay away from my babies. Get out of my territory. Get away from me. They don't walk across highways in 3 steps. And this guy is an experienced outdoorsman, a hunter. He knows what bears look like. And I've had this discussion with people and, people on the show, people off the show, that you don't have to be an experienced woodsman or hunter or outdoors person to know what a bear looks like. I mean, even a quick glimpse, if it's from a distance and you're seeing something between 2 trees and something black moves, it's got dark hair, and you're just going to say, that was Bigfoot. No, that could have been a bear. But if you're literally feet from something and you see detail, long legs, the face, the arms, the hands, the feet, you're seeing details. You're not mistaking that for a bear. I'm not saying all Bigfoot reports can't be bear, or some Bigfoot reports can't be a bear. Of course they can. Like I said, very long distances, lots of trees in the way. You're getting a fleeting glimpse of something dark. Yeah, it could have been a bear. But when people see things like this up close and they're seeing the face, they're seeing lots of detail, there's no way they're seeing a bear. Again, they're lying or they saw a Bigfoot. And this story really strikes me as well. It's a road crossing. He mentions the long hair coming like past the feet. Again, bears, their hair is not that long typically, especially around the feet. So, but again, he had this oncoming traffic. So it makes you wonder, did the other person in the other car with the high beams see this creature as well? There's no other reports here, so who knows? But thought this was a cool one, another roadside crossing. All right, so our second story from Wayne County comes to us from the year 1993. This is also from winter, December. He's not sure the exact date, but December, winter 1993. Hunter sees creature through a rifle scope. So I will read this. Location details. This is a big tract of land, 2,000 acres near Hancock, New York, Pennsylvania borderline. Nearest town is Hancock, New York. Nearest road, it was State Game Lands, Road 299. Observed. This is all in caps, so should I yell this into the microphone? I won't. Observed. Okay, gentlemen. First, I can't believe this even happened to me. I love to hunt and fish and spend lots of time in the outdoors. This incident happened in 1993 in the northeastern corner of the state of Pennsylvania, near Hancock, New York, on the Pennsylvania border line. I was hunting for deer on our regular season. I walked into an area where in the past I've never hunted. Thought I would try it out. The area was thick pine tree area bordered by a large swamp. I found a large pine and sat under it. The first thing I remember was this horrific smell, like something rotten. I sat for about an hour when I caught a glance of a bear, so I thought. I remember saying to myself, what a big bear that is. Then I realized it was walking upright. Okay, no big deal. Bears walk upright, but not for at least 200 yards. When I put my scope on this thing, I soon realized it was no bear. I saw a Bigfoot. The features were like that of a man. I was shaking so bad. I've never been so frightened in my life. This thing just walked through the woods. I never went to check the tracks. I was that upset. I waited until it was out of sight and, believe me, ran out of there. I told the party I was with. Well, they laughed at me, and that's that. One thing, though, this creature was not as tall as Bigfoot stories I've heard. I'd say it was about 5 foot 10 inches tall, very wide across, and walking with a slight limp. Also noticed, just the smell, very bad, rotten-like. Other witnesses, just him waiting for the deer. No other stories that he's aware of. It was around 2:30 in the afternoon, low lighting conditions, light snow was falling. And this took place in a pine forest bordered by a swamp. Follow-up investigation by BFRO investigator Jim Osborne. When I talked with the witness, he stated that from his vantage point, he could not see the face directly, just the shoulder and side of the head. He saw a very human-like ear. The creature was black in color and very stocky. So this is also a very interesting one, and one that there's really no gray area here. It's either fake or he saw something. And again, he says at first he thought it was a bear. He sees this dark thing moving in the distance, thinks it's a bear, and then realizes, like, wait, it's upright and it's walking continuously. And he says the same thing. Bears walk upright, but not for 200 yards. They take a few steps and back down on all fours. They're not going to walk long distances, very short distances. Again, you're talking a couple of steps. They're like toddlers. And then he looks at it through his scope, so he's getting this zoomed in view. He says he didn't see the face, but he saw a human-like ear, and he could tell that this was an upright primate. The smell is also one of those things that we hear in a lot of Bigfoot sightings, not all of them, but that smell, that rotten, decaying smell, like a wet dog or like a dumpster, just that sweet, sickening, rotten garbage smell or decaying meat. People describe it in many different ways, but it's always a bad smell. It's not a skunk. It's something rotten. I like that he used that word because that kind of sums up what most people smell, like rotting meat, rotting flesh, rotting vegetation, just like something that's been out and about and never showered and never bathed. And again, this is a hunter. This is someone who's been in the woods his whole life, very comfortable out there, knows their wildlife. You're going to shoot something, you got to know what you're shooting at. You got to know that it's not a person. You got to know that it's an animal that is in season, that is of the right size and age and all that stuff. Like hunting is not just, a lot of people think, oh, the people just go out with guns and shoot whatever. It's really not. It's a very disciplined activity. So these guys who go out hunting, they know exactly what they're looking at. They know exactly what they're looking for. And I love stories like this because you have someone who's now shaken. You have somebody who's out there hunting with a firearm, can defend himself. You're not going to be afraid of a deer. You're not going to be afraid of a bear that's many, many, yards away. So why was this guy so shaken? And again, the sad thing we hear is that his friends laughed at him. And I understand people don't want to believe, but if someone sees something and they're that shaken up, even if you don't believe that they saw Bigfoot or that they saw a UFO or whatever it is, some compassion, some like, okay, well, what did you see? And that's why I always say in the show, question everything. It doesn't mean you disbelieve them. It doesn't mean you automatically do believe them. It's just you need to question it and maybe not laugh at people because there are things out there that we just don't understand. So another cool story. Really like this one. Just very simple and straightforward. And again, in the snow, in the previous story, he could have looked for tracks. He did. He didn't get out of his car, but he was like kind of peeking out the window looking for tracks for that roadside crossing. This guy didn't even want to go look for tracks, and I don't blame him. You have something that frightens you, something that shouldn't exist. Who's going to want to go and tempt this thing and taunt this thing? Interestingly, he says it was shorter and stockier, wide, but he also says it walked with a limp, and that is very interesting. So is this thing ill? Maybe that's why it didn't grow as big. It could have been a juvenile. It's winter. Most animals, they're going to bulk up for the winter. So to see something, our first story, it was slender, and that was in September, I believe. So not as cold, but now you have winter, you have snow on the ground, and they're talking about a bulkier Sasquatch. So I thought that was interesting. And again, when you get these weird details like a limp or something weird about a footprint that a biologist can say, oh, that's this certain disease or that's certain injury, that's always interesting to me because why throw that in there? It's just a weird thing. But he says this thing was walking with a limp. So very interesting. And maybe that's why it wasn't as big. But a very cool story nonetheless. All right. So the final two stories I'm going to talk about tonight come from Columbia County. And the reason I picked Columbia County, I mentioned earlier, I might explain this. There was another very famous creepy thing in Pennsylvania that is located in Columbia County, and that is the little ghost town of Centralia. And I'm going to cover that next week. And that is at the lovely Rebecca's spurring on of me to talk about Centralia because we're going to be going camping next week. And there's a little haunted house attraction there that has it's like all the coal mines and the anthracite and stuff like that. And they mentioned Centralia in the ride. It's like one of our favorite rides there. I mean, I have only been once before, but she loves that ride. I love it now as well. But it's a cool little haunted house and like coal mine themed. But they mentioned Centralia, and I've heard of Centralia before, but a lot of people haven't. And I will talk about that more next week. But I just wanted to talk about why I'm focusing on Columbia County, because next week's going to be more about the ghost town and not Bigfoot stuff. But I figured, let me see if there's any Bigfoot sightings in the same county as Centralia. And there are two. So we're going to get to those. And this is the first one. So this is another one from 1993. Late April, the person says, two campers are chased from an apple orchard by a 5.5-foot tall covered creature. We'll get back to that because the last story had a shorter creature as well. Location details. The incident occurred outside of Catawissa, Pennsylvania, near Route 42. Again, if I'm mispronouncing that, please let me know. Observed, one of my friends and I were camping on his family's land near Catawissa. It was just the two of us late at night. We were sitting by the campfire talking when we noticed we needed more wood for the fire. There was an old apple orchard nearby, and we scavenged dead wood off the ground for the fire. It was a very well-lit night, and we could see very well. As soon as we stepped into the orchard, we heard a sort of screeching or wheezing noise around 100 yards away, as best we could tell. We didn't think anything of it because we were always hearing noises from around that area, so we continued into the orchard. After about 10 steps in, we heard an awful scream that sounded like it needed 2 or 3 heads to make it. We looked in the direction and then saw it. Maybe 50 yards away was the creature. It was about 5 foot 6 inches tall and about 350 to 400 pounds. It started running at us at full speed, and it was incredibly fast. We immediately turned around and headed out of the orchard for our car. As soon as we were in the clearing, the creature stopped running at us and turned away. Needless to say, we put out the fire and left for the night. Also noticed, about a month beforehand, we found a mangled deer in the middle of the clearing, not eaten at all, just attacked and killed. We didn't think anything of it at the time. After the incident, we think that it may have been a warning of some kind to stay out of its territory. About a week before the incident, we noticed that all of the windows had been smashed out of the sheds, and the strange odor was in the air. We, at the time, thought it could have been vandals, and it might have been. We had heard of stories before in and around the orchard and pond and just passed it off as some sort of wildlife. Other witnesses, we were gathering firewood in the apple orchard, so just the two of them. Time and conditions, about 2 a.m, very well-lit night. The area is about 200 feet from the nearest road. There is a large man-made pond on one side that has a natural spring running right beside it. Behind the pond is a decent-sized, heavily forested mountain with many small caves if you know where to find them. On another side is a large open field with the apple orchard behind that. There were also about 5 small sheds in the clearing. So I like this one as well. They get a look at it for one. So again, you have either they're lying or they saw something. They hear this scream, and this was interesting. Like, it needed 2 or 3 heads to make it, and we hear this a lot with alleged Bigfoot screams or howls. People will say there was like almost many voices. Like, they'll say there was this low guttural component, there was a very high screech, or like a woman screaming, and then maybe something in the middle. Sometimes more, sometimes less, but the 2 or 3 heads to make it really resonated with me, because you hear this a lot in Bigfoot stories, that there's this multi-layered sound to it, whereas a lot of animal calls, you don't get that. It's either a high-pitched scream, a low guttural growl, something in the middle. But a lot of people, when they hear these sorts of screams, they say it sounded like 2 or 3 different animals all mixed together. So like something out of a sci-fi movie where the sound engineers will just pick different animals and mix a sound together to get like the T-Rex sound or Chewbacca or, anything like that. So I thought that was very interesting. It bluff charged them, apparently. It started running at them. A bulky creature, perhaps. They're saying this was about 5'6", so not very tall. Very similar to the previous story, but 350 to 400 pounds. So a big, bulky creature, but not very tall. So I thought that was interesting as well. The mangled deer, I like that they say it could have been something else, the windows being smashed. They admit that this all could have been vandals. The deer being mangled is very interesting. They found a mangled deer in the middle of a clearing. So it wasn't hit by a car, wasn't eaten. It doesn't say if they checked for a bullet wound. I'm guessing they didn't see one. It could have been on the underside where they couldn't see, but they said mangled. Again, I would like more information on that. Mangled how? Usually when you see a mangled deer, it was hit by a car, because just the force of a vehicle hitting it. And interesting that no predators had or scavengers had come after it and eaten it. It's just this dead mangled deer. So almost like creatures around it knew it wasn't theirs to take. So very interesting. The sheds had the windows smashed out, strange odor. Again, that could have easily been vandals. They admit that here, which I like. They're not just saying, oh, everything we saw was Bigfoot. But they saw this creature. They don't mention more details other than the height, the weight, that it was running towards them. Once they got into the clearing, so once this thing felt like, hey, if I move out of these trees, I lose some of my cover, it stops. So that to me is also really interesting. Like, it knew, I don't want to go out there because then I'm exposed. I'm not in the cover of the trees. So really cool story. I like this one too, because there's not a lot of room for ambiguity here. They either saw something unexplainable or they're lying, and I don't think they're lying. All right, so the last story for this episode from Columbia County, Pennsylvania. Vocalizations heard on Knob Mountain. And this is from the summer of 1989, August. This is a long one, so just bear with me. Location details: just outside of the village of Orangeville. Village is located at the base of Knob Mountain and has one road called Mine Street that runs alongside the mountain and connects to Route 93 and Route 487. There are a few houses near the end of the road, and the woods from the mountain come down right next to the road. Last 100 yards of the road before it connects is all woods to the northern side. Nearest town is Orangeville. Nearest road is Route 93. Observed. Was out late one night walking my beagle before retiring for the night. We live in a somewhat rural area. The village of Orangeville has a population of about 600 or so. Because of the town makeup at the time, very few people were up at that hour. So, in walking west up the road with the mountain to the north of us, all the houses on the hill were dark and quiet, with only a dog or two barking. I had walked my dog about 300 yards up the road, about 200 yards away from the closest house. At this point, the woods coming down from the mountain are right next to the road. We had just stopped and were beginning our walk back to the house when my dog stopped and looked up at the mountain. The hair on his back stood up and he started growling. I looked up to where he was staring and didn't see any kind of movement or hear or smell anything different. After about 10 seconds, I tried to coax the dog into heading back to the house, but he did not move. About 30 seconds after the dog first stopped, I heard a howl/scream of something that I have never heard before. It seemed to come down off the mountain. It didn't sound close by, so I figured the sound to come somewhere in front of us about one half or near the top of the mountain. The sound, similar to the one at Blue North/Klamath recording. I will link to this below, and I'll see if I can even insert it here just so you guys can listen. Made all my hair stand on end, and my dog made a protective stance between me and the sound. The sound lasted for about 20 seconds or less with the echo through the woods. Several of the dogs on the hill also began barking when the sound came down off the mountain. At the time, I had no idea what I had heard. I coaxed my dog to move, and we went back down to the house and turned in for the night. Since that night, I haven't heard any other sounds like that. The next morning, when I took the dog up for his morning walk, I stopped in the area where we had heard the sound. The dog acted normally, and I looked for any kind of animal tracks, but didn't notice anything along the road edge or just inside the woods. It wasn't until a few months later that when I was watching Sightings, I love that show, and they played the recording of a possible Bigfoot scream from Washington State, that I realized I had heard the same sound in Pennsylvania just a few months previous. At that time, I really didn't know of anyone to report it to, and also figured no one would believe that I had heard such a sound. It wasn't until a recent TV show on TLC about Bigfoot that I decided to do some more research and find a location to log my sighting. Also noticed, my dog, a beagle, stopped and looked towards the direction of the sound, which came about 10 seconds before I actually heard it. As best I can guess, I probably smelled something that he didn't like or trust, and was already looking in the direction of the sound would come from. It was just him and his dog going out for a late night walk. Other stories, none that I have heard of in the local area. Relatives of my father, who grew up several counties away, told stories of strange sightings, but to the best of my memory, I recall they were all dismissed as eye tricks with light and shadow. Time and conditions, late night, approximately 12 midnight. Calm night, very light wind and clear skies. Environment. Next, the road to the north is weed and briar undergrowth. Going deeper into the woods, it clears up some with older growth forest and little undergrowth. In years past, sogging was done on the mountains, but not for over 40 years that I am aware of. Old logging roads are all reclaimed by woods again. Visibility in the woods is approximately 30 yards or so, depending if in an old growth area or old lumbering areas. On low wind days, sound travels quite well through the woods. And there's no follow-up here. This one is a little more ambiguous because it is just a sound. Again, I'll try to throw the sound in where appropriate, just so you guys can listen to it. I will also link to it in the description below, so you guys can go listen to what he's saying he heard or similar to what he heard. But we have a dog. We have a dog reacting to something, stopping, the hair bristling up, growling. So there was something there. We can't say for sure that it was Bigfoot, but there was something there. You know, you have this independent, it's not just one person hearing this and saying what he heard. I mean, there's a dog behaving here in a way that is defensive and perhaps frightened. And then he hears this sound, and it echoes through the woods. And then the other dogs in the neighborhood start reacting to it. So pretty interesting. And then the next morning, the dog acts normally. So not sure what to make of this one. Again, tree knocks and howls. they're hard to say what they are because we're not seeing anything. We're not seeing what might be doing the tree knocks or howling. If you see a Bigfoot with its mouth open and you can tell that it's growling at you, which you do hear in some Bigfoot reports, then that's great. That's you have a causality there. It's an interesting story, interesting vocalization, interesting thing to hear, especially late at night. And when your dog reacts to things, when your pets react to things, that's always your sort of litmus test for like, am I really experiencing this? Because now you have another living creature. If a person can't be there, you have a dog or a cat or whatever just looking at something and reacting to it in a certain way. So that tells me that there was something there. Can't say it was Bigfoot, but the growl is interesting, the howl. And I love that he mentioned Sightings. That was like one of my favorite shows when I was younger in college. I think that was on like every Friday night. I think it got replaced by the X-Files, and I was really angry. But then the X-Files turned out to be a good show for the most part. So, yeah, that is our last story for the evening. All right, everybody, I hope you enjoyed another trip through the Keystone State, northeastern Pennsylvania, looking at some Bigfoot sightings. 4 of these stories, I think, are really strong. The last one, a little bit iffy because it's just a sound. Hard to say what it was. Creepy nonetheless. I mean, you're out there at night, you're near the woods in a little town, and you hear something ungodly like that. Maybe it was something known, maybe not. But either way, very creepy. But I love these stories. Next week, we're going to be talking about Centralia, ghost town. Very cool. And I will get into that next week. In the meantime, everybody, question everything. Even when these reports seem so straightforward, you still have to question them. And that's why I always put in the caveat there that these people could be lying. I mean, it's a possibility. I don't blindly accept any reports. I'm not saying these people are lying. I'm just saying it is a possibility. I tend to believe people who sit down at a computer and type out lengthy report details and then take a half an hour or an hour or 2 hours to sit down with a researcher to do follow-up and speak with them and give them additional details, answer their questions. For what payoff? Why would you hoax that? What is the reward for that? You're spending your time, your energy. You're not getting any. I mean, these people aren't leaving their names. If they are, it's like a first name. So no one's ever going to know who these people really are. So I don't see why people would lie. Again, it's not out of the realm of possibility, but how probable is it? These people believe they saw what they saw, and I tend to believe them that they saw something they can't explain. Was it Bigfoot? I don't know, but we may never know. But cool stories nonetheless. Question everything, everybody. If you have a story you'd like me to talk about, or you'd like to share, you'd like to come on the show, anything. You want to talk to me? You don't want me to put it on the show? I won't put it on the show. But I love hearing everybody's stories. So shoot me an email, jason@oddantold.com. I get through the whole episode and I can't even get my real email address without flubbing it. But that's podcasting for you. All right, everybody. Until next time, we will talk about Centralia, more Pennsylvania stuff coming up. Hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Leave your thoughts and comments below. Please be respectful, and we will see you next week. Rock and roll, everybody.